The cemetery horror stories you're about to see will show you a glimpse of the terror and unexplained dangers that ordinary people have encountered in cemeteries around the world. In the story you're about to watch, a group of friends stumbled upon something completely bizarre in a cemetery at night and had to run to save their lives. But before we start the story, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying tales. Dude, if I tell you what happened that night, you swear you'll believe me. Because even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear those sounds. And man, it's not in my head. That was real. Too real. It all started on one of those autumn nights that already come loaded with strange energy, you know? The cold cutting your face, the wind blowing through the trees, dry leaves scratching the ground. It was like the environment itself wanted to warn us that we were about to make a huge mistake. But, of course, nobody wanted to listen. Jake, who's always been the wildest in the group, came up with an idea that, looking back now, was clearly an invitation to tragedy. "Let's go to Bachelor's Grove tonight," he blurted out in the middle of our circle, with that grin of someone who knows they're suggesting something absurd but still wants to see what happens. Bachelor's Grove. Just saying that name sends shivers down the spine of anyone from around here. That cemetery carries a heavy reputation. Decades of disappearances, sightings, rituals. The list goes on. But at that moment, it sounded more like a challenge than a warning. There were 4 of us, me, Jake, Emma, and Liam. Childhood friends, kind of used to chasing supernatural experiences, but nothing that had ever really panned out before. Until then, anyway. We left the car far from the cemetery's main entrance. It wasn't by accident. Jake already knew an alternate path, hidden, that went through the woods. According to him, it was the best route to avoid any security, or any curious onlookers who might be around. Actually, looking back now, it seemed more like that path was meant for those who shouldn't be there. As soon as we turned off the engine, silence took over. And man, what a strange silence. It wasn't the usual kind, like end of the day in the countryside. It was heavy. It felt like even the sound of the wind was stuck, muffled, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Jake led the way, all excited. Emma, a bit suspicious, kept looking back all the time, and Liam was already starting to regret it. And I won't lie, I was already feeling that uncomfortable sensation, you know? Like when you feel like you're being watched, even though you don't see anyone. It was exactly that. That kind of chill that starts at the nape of your neck and runs cold down your spine. The path was narrow, all closed in by twisted branches, roots coming out of the ground, and a smell. Old, damp, kind of rotten. You know that smell that makes you imagine there's something dead nearby? Well, that's it. Every step we took, it seemed like the woods got denser, as if the forest didn't want to let us pass. Liam stopped in the middle of the path. "Man, there's something wrong here, I swear. I feel like someone's watching us." At that moment, I even tried to laugh, just to lighten the mood. "Chill, man. It's just your head playing tricks on you." But I didn't even believe what I was saying. Emma quickened her pace, holding on to Jake's arm. She looked around as if expecting something to come out of the woods. And man, at any moment I really thought that could happen. After about 10 minutes of walking through that green maze, the forest began to open up. In the middle of that darkness, we saw a rusty gate, half fallen over, almost completely swallowed by the woods. The chains hanging from it creaked slightly, swaying in the wind, making a sound that, man, it was like a lament. Seriously. In front of the gate, several crooked tombstones, some broken, others almost completely covered by earth and roots. The ground was all uneven, full of holes and moss. The moon? Not a sign. The sky was completely overcast. No stars, just that absolute darkness that made Jake's lantern seem too weak for the size of the void in front of us. When we crossed that gate, the temperature seemed to drop about 5 degrees, instantly. I'm not exaggerating, the wind became sharper and the feeling that there was something, I don't know, surrounding us became even stronger. Jake, in all his brilliance, says, "Let's split up, that way we cover more ground." Emma and I almost shouted, "Are you crazy?" but I don't know, it seemed like no one wanted to be the first to say they were scared. And deep down, I think none of us wanted to seem cowardly. We ended up agreeing. Jake went left, Emma headed towards a more central part near a cracked mausoleum, and Liam and I stayed more to the right, near some old tombstones with inscriptions that were no longer legible. With each step, that place seemed more wrong. There was an energy, suffocating. It felt like the air was getting heavier, like each breath required an absurd effort. And, in the middle of all this, Liam stopped again. Seriously, man, I feel it. We're not alone here. I was about to respond, but suddenly there was a sound. A sound that, man, just didn't make sense, coming from deep within the cemetery. It sounded like a chant, a kind of dragged-out, ancient melody, as if someone were intoning a prayer or a spell. I don't know. It was soft, but you could hear it clearly. And it wasn't a recording, no, that was a voice of someone or of something. Liam widened his eyes. Man, you hear that, right? I just nodded, unable to even open my mouth. And it was at that exact moment that I realized it wasn't just the sound. There was a presence, strong, heavy. It felt like the entire forest was holding its breath, watching what was about to happen. And then, well, the story only starts to get really strange from here. The sound of that chant seemed to get louder and clearer. And man, there was something in the intonation that just didn't make sense. It was as if it wasn't meant to be heard, you know? Like something ancient, forgotten, that shouldn't exist anymore. A low, somewhat dragged out, somewhat dissonant melody that gave that constant chill, as if your whole body wanted to warn you that it was time to get out of there. I looked at Liam, and he was already pale, staring into the depths of the cemetery, where that sound seemed to come from. Man, let's go. Now, he whispered, grabbing my arm so hard it hurt. And look, at that moment, for the first time, I really thought about just turning around and running away, and then came the second problem. Emma and Jake. We couldn't just abandon them. So, almost automatically, I pulled Liam by the arm and said, "Come on, let's find them and get out of here. This is wrong. It's very wrong." As we walked, the sound seemed to guide us, and the closer we got, the more we could perceive that it wasn't just a chant. There was an echo, you know, as if the earth itself, the trees, even the tombstones were vibrating along with that sound. It was a supernatural experience, one of those you never forget. In the middle of all that darkness, the lantern trembled in my hand, and the beam of light seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. It was then, suddenly, that I heard Emma's voice, somewhat distant, somewhat muffled, shouting, "Guys, come here, quick!" Her tone wasn't one of fear, but rather confused, intrigued, as if she had seen something she couldn't understand. We followed her voice, dodging branches, jumping over some sunken tombs, until we reached a clearing, surrounded by twisted trees, which seemed to bend inward, as if they were hiding that place from the rest of the world. And then, we saw it. Right in the center of the clearing there was a figure. I can't say it was a person because, man, that didn't look human. It was facing away from us, wearing a black tattered cloak, hooded, standing right in the middle of a huge drawing on the ground. A pentagram made of branches, stones, and, man, there were some bones there too. Bones of some animal. Or, by the size, maybe not just an animal. The figure was chanting. That same chant we had been hearing from back there. And it was slowly circling the symbol, as if conducting some kind of ritual. The air was heavy, charged with a negative energy that you could almost feel on your skin. The smell also changed. It became stronger, more unbearable. A mix of wet earth, rust, and something rotten. Something that was definitely not natural. I looked to the side and saw Emma, somewhat hypnotized, standing there wide-eyed, breathing fast. Jake was also there, a little further away, holding his phone, recording. I even tried to say something like, "Come on, let's get out of here." But the words just wouldn't come out. My throat felt locked, dry, and then, that's when the figure stopped circling. Suddenly, at the exact moment it noticed our presence, that chant ceased. Absolute silence. And man, that silence was worse than any sound I've ever heard in my life. The figure remained motionless for a couple of seconds, as if deciding what to do. And then, it turned. Slowly. First the hood turned towards us, then the whole body, but man, you couldn't see its face. It was completely shrouded in the shadow of the hood. All you could see were two dots, two red dots. They weren't eyes. They were like embers. Two pieces of glowing coal embedded in the void. No one moved. No one spoke. I felt my heart race, beating so hard it felt like it was going to explode in my chest. Liam, beside me, was trembling, literally trembling as if he were in the middle of hypothermia. Jake lowered his phone right away. And Emma seemed like she wasn't even breathing. And then, without warning, without sound, without absolutely anything, the figure took a step towards us, just one. And at that exact moment there was a scream, but it wasn't from us, nor from it. It was a high-pitched, shrill scream that seemed to come from all corners at once. From the ground, from the trees, from the tombstones. A sound that pierced through the whole body, vibrating in the bones, in the chest, in the head. The figure opened its arms as if preparing for, I don't know, something. And then, it started to run. Towards us. But man, it wasn't a normal run. It seemed to glide on the ground, half floating, half dragging, coming so fast that for a second my brain just froze. Like there was no time to think, only to react. And the reaction was one: run. I shouted, "Run!" pulled Liam by the arm and took off without even looking back. Jake did the same, dropped everything and disappeared into the woods. Emma too, stumbling over roots, almost falling, but running as best she could. The problem was that running there wasn't easy. The forest seemed to have become even denser, as if every tree, every branch, every root wanted to hold us back. I could hear the steps, or whatever that noise was, of the thing coming after us, getting closer and closer. You could hear that strange scream echoing, along with a sound of heavy, wet breathing, as if something was almost catching up to us. The path we had taken before seemed to no longer exist. Everything seemed different, darker, more twisted, and the only thing going through my mind was, if that thing touches us, it's over. It's the end. But, by some miracle, we didn't stop. We didn't think, we just ran. We ran on autopilot, dodging by instinct, jumping, stumbling, almost rolling downhill until we finally saw a gap in the woods, a glimmer in the middle of the darkness. It was the way back, the path that led to where we had left the car, and man, if you think it was easy, it wasn't even close. We dashed through that gap in the woods, as if our lives depended on it, and honestly, I think they did. When we spotted the car up ahead, parked there, with that somewhat dull shine reflecting the little moonlight that was starting to appear, it was like seeing a lifeboat in the middle of a shipwreck. No one said anything. No one looked back. All you could hear were the panting breaths, the branches breaking underfoot, and in the distance, that sound, that thing, still coming after us. Jake got there first, unlocked the car, almost dropping the keys on the ground. We threw ourselves inside. I don't even know how I managed to get in, closed the door, hit the dashboard and shouted, "Start this thing for God's sake." The engine took forever to start. And in that time, I swear, you could see, in the rearview mirror, that figure coming out of the woods, coming towards us, dragging that cloak with those two red dots in place of a face. It wasn't running anymore. It was walking, slowly, as if it knew that, sooner or later, it would get us, until the car started. Jake floored it, took off so hard he almost left the suspension on the ground. We peeled out, throwing dirt and gravel everywhere, and only looked back when we were already far away, on the road, about 2 kilometers from there. The silence inside the car was absurd. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. We just breathed deeply, trembling, sweating cold, with that heavy feeling in the chest, as if we still hadn't completely escaped. When we finally stopped at a gas station, already far from there, everyone got out, just stared at each other, trying to understand what had just happened. And it was there, looking at each other with that look of terror, that we made a pact. Without needing to say much, never again would we get into one of these. Never again cemeteries, dense woods, or this exploration talk. Because man, there are things in this world that are better left alone. Very alone. What a horror. Did you feel that chill? Answer yes or no here in the comments. And the mystery continues in the next story, where the night watchman of the cemetery found himself cornered upon encountering an unwanted visitor. The first time I saw that door open by itself, I almost quit my job right then and there. I work as a night watchman at St. Michael's Cemetery, an old place full of twisted trees and weather-worn tombstones. During the day, it's pretty calm. Visits, flowers, people crying. But at night it's just me, the silence, and that feeling that something is wrong. I always thought cemeteries at night were just scary movie stuff. I had never felt anything real. Until that night. I was there in the cabin, as always, watching the security cameras. There were 4 screens, one at the gate, one at the back wall, one at the chapel, and one scanning the main paths. Everything was normal, just the wind blowing the branches and the shadows stretching on the ground. Then out of nowhere, the door of the administrative building, that old wooden door that creaks as if it has a groan trapped in its hinges, opened, slowly, as if someone were pushing it. But there was no one there. My heart skipped a beat. I looked at the camera, then at the cabin window, which had a direct view of the building. The door was indeed open, swaying slightly, as if someone had just passed through. Damn, it must have been the wind, I thought, trying to convince myself. But the wind doesn't open locked doors, and I was sure I had locked that thing earlier. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. They weren't normal footsteps. They were heavy, metallic, as if someone were dragging chains on the ground. And they were coming from the main path, where the oldest tombs were. I looked at the camera again, and my blood ran cold. There was a man there, a tall, thin guy, with a posture too erect, as if he had a beam on his back. He was standing between 2 tombstones, his back to the camera, and I couldn't see his face. You know that chill that runs down your spine when you feel that something shouldn't be there? Well, that's it. The footsteps continued. Clang, 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 and the man started to walk. Slowly at first, as if he were just strolling. But then, out of nowhere, he stopped and turned his head, straight at the camera, as if he knew I was watching. I didn't see his face clearly, but there was something wrong with those eyes. They reflected the moonlight in a way that wasn't natural. And then he started to run. It wasn't a normal run. It was too fast, awkward, as if his bones didn't move right. And worse, he was coming straight for the cabin. I almost knocked over the chair when I stood up. My hands were trembling as I grabbed the radio and called the police. "There's an intruder in the cemetery," I shouted, not even trying to hide the panic in my voice. "He's coming to the cabin. It's urgent." The operator tried to calm me down, said they would send a patrol car, but I could barely hear, because the footsteps, those metallic footsteps, were already outside. And then, silence. Nothing. Just my heart beating as if it wanted to jump out of my chest. I looked out the window, but there was no one there. The door of the administrative building was still open, swaying gently, and the man gone. When the police arrived, and it was quick, thank God, they searched everything. Nothing. No sign of an intruder, no broken gates, no traces. But there was one thing. Marks on the ground. They looked like footprints, but not from shoes. They were deeper, as if something heavy had passed by, dragging its feet. And the strangest thing, they just stopped in the middle of the path, as if the guy had evaporated. The police looked at me with that, "This guy is crazy" face, but I swear I didn't make anything up. That night changed everything. Now every time I enter that cabin, I feel like I'm not alone. The silence of the cemetery is no longer just silence. It's a wait, as if something is holding its breath, waiting. And I can't stop looking at that damn door of the building, because I know that one day, it will open again. And when that happens, I don't know if I'll be able to escape. After that night, nothing in the cemetery was the same. The police searched everything, questioned the few residents nearby, but found nothing. No strange man, no thief, no explanation. They said it must have been a vagrant trying to steal something, or worse, someone trying to scare me. But I knew it wasn't any of that, because things only got worse. In the first week, there were just small scares. The cabin light would flicker for no reason. The radio would pick up interference, and distorted whispers would come from the speaker. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was a problem with the old wiring. But then came the second time the door opened. It was a foggy early morning, one of those where the air is heavy and humid. I was doing my rounds, flashlight in hand, trying not to look too long at any tomb. When I passed by the administrative building, I saw that the door was closed, locked. I went back to the cabin, relieved, until I heard the creak, that unmistakable sound of old wood giving way. When I looked at the camera, the door was open again, and this time, I swear to God, there was a silhouette standing in the doorway. It wasn't the man, it was something shorter, more wrong. The camera image was bad, full of static, but I could see that the thing wasn't moving. It just stood there, as if it were staring at me through the screen. I wasn't breathing. I wasn't blinking. And then, it raised an arm. Slowly, as if it were calling me. I almost peed myself right there. I turned off the monitor and sat in the chair, trembling, waiting for the day to break. But the worst part? The next day, when I went to check the camera footage, there was nothing. The door appeared closed the whole time. No silhouette, no movement. That's when I started to doubt my sanity. The following nights were hell. The silence of the cemetery now had a life of its own. Sometimes I would hear low moans coming from the oldest graves. Other times, I would see shadows quickly passing between the trees, always in the corner of my eye. And that feeling of being watched? It became constant, until, a week ago, what I feared most happened. I was in the cabin trying not to look at the camera showing the door of the building, when the radio turned on by itself. Static, and then a voice. It wasn't human. It was hoarse, full of something that sounded like pain and anger mixed. "You shouldn't be here." I almost ripped the cord out of the socket. But then came the worst. Someone or something knocked on the cabin door. It wasn't a normal knock. It was heavy, as if they had used an iron fist. I froze. And then, bang. Another knock. Harder. The wood of the door cracked. I didn't think twice. I grabbed my phone, called the police, and ran out the back door. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I reached the gate. When the patrol car arrived, the police found me huddled on the ground, sweating cold. They searched the entire cemetery. Nothing. But when we went back to the cabin, the door was dented from the inside, as if something had tried to get out, and on the floor in front of the cameras, there was my chair turned over, as if someone had sat in it. I quit the next day, but to this day, when I pass by St. Michael's Cemetery, I swear I see a figure standing at the gate, waiting, and I'm sure of one thing, that thing still wants me to come back. How scary. This might have been bizarre, but the encounter that 4 friends had with a man in a cemetery at night, which you're about to see, was even more disturbing. The mist coiled around the tombstones as if it were alive, clinging to our skin, cold and clammy. We shouldn't have been there, but Charles had the brilliant idea of exploring the old chapel cemetery on that Friday the 13th, with a full moon and all. "It'll just be a joke," he said. "No one really believes in those ghost stories anyway." But as we passed through the rusty gate, I felt deep in my chest that the night was going to be different. The place was ancient, with weathered gravestones, faded names, and crooked crosses. The wind howled through the trees, and the moonlight sliced through the mist, creating shadows that moved on their own. Louise was the first to stop. "Do you guys see that?" she whispered, her fingers gripping Victor's arm. In the middle of the mist, about 3 meters ahead, there was something. A tall, too thin figure, as if made only of bone and cloth. We stood still, barely breathing. Charles laughed nervously. "Oh, come on, it's probably just a homeless person or something." But none of us believed that. The figure didn't walk, it glided, as if its feet didn't touch the ground. And when the mist cleared a bit, we saw its clothes. An old, dirty black coat, and under the hat, the eyes. 2 bright spots fixed on us like headlights in the dark. Victor took a step back. "Damn it, let's get out of here," he shouted, but his voice came out thin, full of fear. The figure raised a skeletal hand and pointed at us. When it opened its mouth, the voice wasn't human. It was a hoarse whisper that echoed directly in our heads, as if it had been spoken inside our ears. "Follow me." None of us responded. We just exchanged a glance and in the same instant panicked. Charles was the first to turn and run, and we followed like a herd of cornered animals. Our feet pounded the hard ground, our breath burning in our chests, but I swear we could hear something behind us. Not footsteps, but a dragging sound, like cloth being pulled across the ground. Louise tripped over a gravestone and fell to her knees, screaming. Victor pulled her up by the arm, and we kept running aimlessly through the rows of tombs, the mist getting thicker and thicker. Suddenly, the cemetery wall appeared in front of us, and we almost crashed into it. That's when Charles looked back and groaned. "It's still coming." The figure was there, in the middle of the mist, standing still. This time, it didn't call. It just stood there, watching with those bright eyes, and then, slowly, raised its hand again as if pointing to something behind us. I didn't want to turn. I didn't want to see what it wanted to show us. But something in that old cemetery, on that wrong night, made us look. And that's when everything got worse. We turned at the same time, and what we saw made our blood run cold. Among the gravestones, things were moving. They weren't people. They weren't animals. They were shadows, twisted shapes, crawling on the ground, emerging from beneath the stones. Some had arms that were too long. Others dragged themselves as if they were broken. And all of them were coming toward us. Louise let out a scream that almost burst my eardrums. "Run!" We didn't think. We just reacted. We jumped over the cemetery wall, tearing our clothes on the thorns of the fence, and fell on the other side, into the dense woods. Victor almost twisted his ankle, but no one stopped. We ran as if hell had opened right behind us. And maybe it had. The worst was when I looked back. The man in black was there, standing on the wall, motionless, just watching. The mist coiled around him, but the bright eyes cut through the darkness. He didn't come after us. He just stood there, as if he knew we weren't going to escape that easily. We ran until we reached the street, almost getting hit by a passing car. The driver honked, cursed, but we didn't care. We just got into Charles's car and screamed at him to drive. No one said anything until we were far away at Victor's house with all the lights on and the doors locked. Charles was pale. What the hell was that? No one knew. Louise was shaking and Victor just kept looking at his hand, as if expecting to see something stuck to it. I couldn't get that whisper out of my head. Follow me. And what would have happened if we had obeyed? The next day, we went back there during the day, just to see if there was any explanation. The cemetery was normal, gravestones in place, no trace of what we saw. But there was one thing different, an open grave, in the oldest corner of the place, with no name, no flowers. And on top of the fresh earth, a footprint, just one, as if someone had come out of there that night. We never talked about what happened again. We never went back to that cemetery. But to this day, when the night is too quiet and the mist begins to rise, I remember that man in black and the eyes that shone in the dark. And I wonder if we really escaped, or if he just let us go. Because some doors, once opened, never close again. And some things, once they see you, never forget you. Creepy, huh? It seems that performing rituals in cemeteries is more common than it seems. And what happens when two young people interrupt such a ritual? You'll find out in the next story. But before that, I noticed we're past the halfway point of the video, and I feel like you still haven't hit the like button. If you've enjoyed the stories so far, leave a like to let YouTube know you like the content of this channel and don't want to miss any more horror stories. The wind cut like a knife that night in El Paso, and I don't know why the hell I agreed to go with my mom and James on that damned walk through the cemetery. She always said she needed to feel the energy of the place, that it was important to visit the dead after sunset. I, of course, thought it was just an old lady's superstition, until that night. We entered through the iron gate, that sinister creak making the hairs on my arms stand on end. The silence was heavy, the kind that seems to fill your ears like cotton, only cold. No crickets, no strong wind, just that emptiness that gave the feeling we were being watched. James, always the skeptic, let out a low laugh and said, "See? No ghosts, just a bunch of stone and decaying bones." But I saw the way he looked back, quick, as if someone had called him. That's when we heard it. A cry. Thin, high-pitched, just like a baby's. But it came from everywhere. From behind the tombstones, from the trees, even from below us, as if rising from the earth. My mom froze in place, her eyes wide. "There shouldn't be a child here," she whispered. James tried to hide his fright, but I saw his hand trembling as he grabbed my arm. "Someone must have left an abandoned baby here," he said, but his voice was thin, like a scared little boy's. And then came the smell, out of nowhere, that sweet rotten odor of aged tobacco, like the cigars my grandpa used to smoke before he died. But he had been dead for 10 years, and there was no one else in that cemetery besides us. James muttered a, "What the hell is that?" under his breath, and that's when he got the scare of his life. Something grabbed his arm. It wasn't a touch. It wasn't a mistake. It was a hand, cold, with long, thin fingers, gripping with a force that wasn't human. He screamed and pulled his arm back, but there was nothing there, just the empty air and that tobacco smell that now seemed to suffocate us. My mom started praying softly, and I had never seen her so scared. That's when we heard the footsteps. They weren't normal footsteps from just one person. It was a whole battalion marching in unison, as if a regiment of soldiers was walking among the tombstones. But we couldn't see anyone. The noise came from everywhere, echoing as if it were inside our heads. James looked at me, and I'll never forget what he said. "We need to get out of here. Now." But the mist had already started rising from the ground, white, thick, crawling as if it were alive. And the shadows. God, the shadows. They moved on their own, writhing behind the crosses, whispering things we couldn't understand, but that entered the mind like knives. I felt a chill on the back of my neck, the kind that tells you in your most primitive instinct that you shouldn't be there, that something was going to happen. And that's when I realized we weren't alone. Never had been. I don't know if it was fear that knocked me down or if something pulled me. I just remember the mist rising to my face, cold and sticky like a spider's web, and suddenly, darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in a hospital bed, the white light cutting into my eyes like a knife. My mom was sitting beside me, her face pale, her fingers intertwined in a rosary she clutched as if it were the only safe thing in the world. "What happened?" I asked, and my voice came out hoarse as if I had been screaming for hours. She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "You fainted." But it wasn't just that. She hesitated, as if speaking would make it all real. "When James found you, you were in the middle of a pentagram." That word fell like a brick in my stomach. Pentagram. Not a scratch on the ground, not a teenager's prank. A symbol drawn with something dark and sticky, surrounded by animal remains. Broken branches in the shape of a cross, black candles extinguished, and the smell of burned flesh that still clung to my clothes. James walked into the room then, his face more gray than human. He didn't even greet us, just blurted out, "It was a ritual. Someone was doing some messed up stuff there, and we walked right into it." He looked at my mom, then at me, and lowered his voice. The police are saying it might be connected to the Night Stalker. I felt a chill. The Night Stalker, the serial killer who terrorized the region years ago. The same one they said had made pacts with things that weren't human. Things that left marks at death sites, that attracted presences. My mom made the sign of the cross. It wasn't just any ritual, she whispered. Someone interrupted something, and what was being called didn't leave. James frowned. What do you mean? That's when I remembered. Before blacking out, I had heard, different from the whispers, different from the footsteps, a voice. Clear, as if someone had put their mouth to my ear and said in a tone that wasn't angry but promising, "You will return." And the worst part? I knew deep down in what was left of my sanity that it wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. We never set foot in that cemetery again. Not in the day, let alone at night. We spent years pretending that night didn't happen. But some things can't be buried. They keep scratching at the door of your mind, especially when you least expect it. James changed after that. He became quiet, distant, as if part of him had stayed there, in that damned pentagram. Once drunk, he confessed that he still heard the soldiers' footsteps sometimes, marching down the hallway of his house in the middle of the night, and the smell of tobacco. It always came back when he least expected it. My mom never talked about feeling energies again. She put a cross of salt on every door in the house and lives praying softly, as if fearing that any wrong word would call it back. Sometimes I catch her looking at nothing, her eyes filled with a nameless fear. As for me, well, I try to move on. But there are nights I wake up sweating with the echo of that voice in my head. You will return. And the worst part is that, deep down, I feel it's not a question of if, but when. The cemetery is still there, of course. The broken fence, the tilted tombstones, the mist that rises from the ground, even on warm nights. Sometimes when I drive by, I swear I see figures among the trees. Not human, things that move wrong, as if they're sliding beneath the skin of the world. The police never found out who performed that ritual. Or rather, they think they did. A bunch of stoner teenagers, a dead cat, an occult book bought online. But we know. We know that what we interrupted that night was older, deeper. Something that didn't start with the Night Stalker. It just used him as an invitation. And now we wait. Because deep down, we all know the truth. Some doors once opened, never close again. Weird, huh? And this time, did you feel that chill down your spine? Write yes or no in the comments here. I've never had an easy life, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to face in my new job as a security guard at a cemetery. The place was called Black Hill Cemetery, and everyone knew that area was creepy, full of violence and danger. My shift was from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. During the day, it was manageable. There were other guards around. But when the sun went down, man, those last hours were lonely as hell. In the first few weeks, I got used to the cemetery's silence. During the day, the place seemed peaceful, even beautiful in a way. But when the sun started to set, everything changed. A heavy darkness fell over the place, and the atmosphere became different. The crows got more agitated. The shadows seemed to move on their own. And the wind. The wind carried whispers that sent shivers down my spine. One day, my supervisor called me before I started my rounds. He had a serious look on his face. The kind you know isn't going to bring good news. "Nick, stay sharp," he said. "There have been reports of strange people lurking around the cemetery at night. If you see anything, don't hesitate. Call the police right away." I nodded, but I admit that stuck in my mind. That particular night was colder and darker than usual. I was there with my flashlight and baton, patrolling among the tombstones. Suddenly, I felt a presence. I looked to the side and saw a group of people standing, staring at me from a distance. I couldn't see their faces. They were all in the shadows, but I felt their eyes on me, as if they were piercing my soul. My heart raced, and I tried to stay firm, quickening my pace. That's when I heard a sound. A noise of metal scraping on the ground, followed by muffled murmurs. I followed the sound, and when I got close, I saw two figures crouching, digging like mad near an old tombstone. "Hey! What are you doing there?" I shouted, pointing my flashlight at them. The guys stood up quickly. They were two dirty men, with a look that chilled me to the bone. One of them held a shovel, and the light from my flashlight reflected off the blade like a scythe of death. I tried to push them away, but they advanced towards me, the shovel brandished in the air. The fight was quick and brutal. I'm strong, trained, but those guys fought with a strength that only desperation gives. In the midst of the confusion, one of them managed to slash the tires of my security car. The sound of the air escaping was like a moan in that silent night. With no other option, I ran to the security post and called the police. My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the phone. When the police arrived, they searched the entire cemetery, but the guys had vanished. But near where they were digging, they found a body bag. My blood ran cold when they opened it. Inside was a body, a guy from a local gang, known for being brutal. The police thought the intruders were trying to hide the body there, burying it secretly. When it was all over, I felt a mix of relief and a fear I couldn't explain. That day I realized the cemetery would never be the same. The shadows seemed longer, the silence heavier. I continued my job, but always with the feeling that something or someone was watching me from the depths of the night. And sometimes when the wind passed through the trees, I swore I heard whispers that called my name, reminding me of the night I faced true terror. If you've made it this far, you know this channel thrives on stories like this, ones that stick in your mind and send chills down your spine. If you're not subscribed yet, come join us. There's new stuff every day for those who, like you, aren't afraid to go all the way. Drop an all the way in the comments. I love knowing who's in this with me. And if the video hooked you, that like helps a lot in bringing more good terror your way. To wrap up, there's a video right here that fits the same vibe. Click and continue with me there. I promise it's worth it.